So I'm going to move to. Good evening. I'm Howard Homonoff, and this is Media Reporter. Thank you very much for joining us. Our guest tonight in a follow-up appearance is Cliff Chenfeld, who is the co-founder, co-CEO of Razor and Tie Music, based right here in New York. Cliff, thank you for coming back.
Great to be here, Howard.
And I want to dive right in as a kind of follow-up to your last appearance, which is the music business, and which was really at the forefront, for good and bad, of dealing with the digital revolution.
Let's say mostly bad.
Mostly bad. That's probably a fair, probably not an outrageous statement to start with. But take us back, as you know, from the seat you had as that is beginning. What was it like as you begin to see kind of the changes, and talk especially about how you saw the big record labels dealing with all that?
It's you know, I on one level, it was tough to go through the last 7-10 years, whatever it's been. On another level, sort of see how everything unfolded and kind of be in the middle of it a little bit is, I think, you know, you're there at a very kind of important changes in sort of culture and media and content. First of all, I would say that much of the entertainment industry benefited from real monopoly of the distribution system for a long time. You know, when we were growing up, there were 3 TV networks. You had to go to a movie theater to see a movie. You
12 channels of cable at best.
You had to buy it.
Came along.
Exactly. You had to buy an album to hear the music. And I think that was never a particularly ideal situation for consumers, but it was an awfully great situation for media and entertainment executives. And certain cultures were built up as a result of being in those positions. And it's not completely over. I mean, look, for all the complaining that's going on about TV ratings and everything else and cable, there's enormous amounts of money still being made. But people see the decline that's happening. Well, obviously the music business got hit first because it's the easiest to take and steal. You have to remember that the whole digital music revolution really came in following a decade of CDs being introduced and the CD business completely reinvigorating the music business and creating a certain culture that probably was not best for the music business. Yeah, I mean, think about it. So at some point in the late 80s, CDs become more mainstream, early 90s, and the industry is now benefiting from the fact that 500,000 people each year are buying a new copy of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon at a terrific margin with no marketing cost whatsoever. Everyone replaces their Beatles catalog, but it's not just their Beatles and Pink Floyd.
No cost at development of the content, obviously.
There's nothing. Right? You're selling it for more money. And so, I mean, the music business from 88 to 2000, 2001 is making a significant amount of money. And a significant amount of part of that money is coming from people replacing, just buying new versions of what they already had. That, I think, created a bit of a business culture that may not have been most open to innovation and change, and allowed for executives to believe that they were maybe more important than they were, allowed for expenses and marketing to be less disciplined, because if you spend a couple $1 million on a video, you'll sell another 200,000 copies of Thriller next month. And, you know, so that happened in the music business. And then all of a sudden, people can start listening to music without your permission, and people can start, and I think that as an industry, I mean, people really give the music business a hard time for reacting to that. But I mean, you have to realize that's kind of the mindset that people were coming out of. And, you know, I think that they really didn't know what to do. They were the first ones to get hit. People criticize them a lot, but they're coming in a situation where they're making a significant amount of money. They're the first to deal with this piracy thing. Their reactions to it, not great. But on the other hand, you know, I think that it's also difficult to cause an industry response to something, right? I mean, it's not, you know, so you all of a sudden
people expect that, but that's not the way it really works.
Let's get all the major labels and the publishers and the independents and the artists and this to say, hey, we love the idea of Napster. Just pay us 99 cents a month and we're there. Well, that's very difficult to do. So I do think that there was a lack of vision and some really bad business habits that, by the way, in my opinion, still exists today in much of the music business and throughout the media and entertainment world. So, I think that there was a bit of denial going on, and a belief that certain executives were at major labels and were still making a lot of money and still wanted to make a lot of money, and maybe taking some of the short-term, long-term measures that really were necessary would hurt them in the short term. So there was really a lot of things that were not aligned well.
So we've gotten to this point where now there's a lot of options that the consumer has. There are still some people buying CDs, and certainly they're buying Kids Bop and things like that.
Majority of people who buy Kids Bop is still CDs. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of other ways to get music legally. We'll put aside the illegal for a moment, but in terms of services like Spotify and Pandora and Slacker and things like that. Talk a little bit about those services, and do you like them? Are they good? Are they great for the consumer? Are they good for being in the business? What's your take on those?
My take on those is that we are now finally at the point, I think. I've become optimistic, and I think many others have, about the music business in the last 12 to 18 months, because I think we're finally at the point where there is becoming some correlation between the way that people want to consume music and some monetization of that music, right? So giving people the opportunity to experience something like Spotify, which, if you don't know what Spotify is, there's things like Spotify, Rhapsody. These are pretty much on-demand digital solutions where you can listen to basically anything you want by just typing it in. And any playlist that people make playlists, so I'm in the mood to listen to Creedence Clearwater Revival today or Green Day, and there it is. Listening to whatever you want, whenever you want to, is really how people expect to consume much of media today, whether it's music or TV or movies. So giving people a very elegant, inexpensive way of doing that is finally here. Now, the problems with these they're called music subscription service. The problem is they're not very marketed very well, and there's not that many people using them yet.
Yeah.
But my experience has been, whoever I've introduced them to, the people's response to it is phenomenal. Wait a minute, I can, on my phone and on my computer, listen to 4 million songs for $10 a year, whatever it is.
If you're in the music business, and we'll say the music business broadly, not just limited to the record label business, can you make money with these services? Are they a good thing for the business?
They are a very good thing for the business. Can you make money today? The difference between running a music company today and 10 years ago is 10 years ago you basically put releases out, you would ship X number of units to a group of retailers of CDs and hope that not too many of them came back, and thank you very much. Today, the revenue streams that come in from being in the music business are very diverse and very uneven. And many of them are just at sort of an embryonic stage, but you actually are starting to make decent money from things like YouTube, and you'll make a lot more in the future. Spotify, satellite radio, Pandora. These are all different music services that are now, there's only, I believe, there's only 3 or 4 million people in the United States, I think, who are actually paying for a subscription music service. For where I'm sitting, there's no reason that easily can't be 10 or 20 million, whether that's better marketing, people become more aware of it, whether that's phone companies or cable companies adding the music service as a means of distinguishing themselves from their competition. So I think that because they're very, really good products out there at a very inexpensive price that connect with consumers, I see those markets growing dramatically. And so when you add all of that monetization up of the music, I'm very optimistic about the music business. We're just hitting a fraction of the people now. There's always going to be people who steal. You just have to deal with that. But really, piracy is going down as people look at this and go, I can get everything I want anyway. Why am I going to steal?
What impact is all of that, if you can see it yet? We're pretty early and not that many. What kind of impact is it having on the music itself? On what people listen to, what you like, what's available to people? Do you see that?
Well, that's a very good question. The music business today, the music culture, the music business today is much more balkanized than it was when, 20 years ago. Because people have the opportunity to find what they want to find, kind of interact with others who have similar interests, and there's different scenes and different musical genres that it can exist completely online and sort of, in local venues and live venues. And so it's funny to see how we have a number of artists on our roster who have really successful careers who probably 98 or 99% of music listeners don't know who they are,
Right.
but in their world. This is something you can do today that you could not do 20 years ago. You can have a very sustainable career by catering to a number of people who you can interact with inexpensively, right? You would not have been able to reach those people 20 years ago. Now you can, now they're loyal, and some of those people spend a lot of money on your material. So a number of our bands, when we put their new music out, we go directly to their really hardcore fans who we have ability to connect with and offer them an enhanced version of the new music, a CD, exclusive download, merchandise, and we'll do a pre-sale, and we'll get a significant number of sales from that before we even go out. That was not happening 20 years ago.
How about the live event business, which seems, anecdotally, it's really expensive to go to a concert nowadays.
Kid Rock has a $20 ticket now.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's a man of the people for you. So, but there's a price to be paid. You have to go to a Kid Rock concert. So, but talk about, I mean, you guys, I think, certainly are involved in this through Kids Bop, and as you mentioned, through the artists on your label.
Right.
What's that business like, and how is there a great future in that business?
Yes. Well, the live business is, I want to start answering your questions more simply. But I can't answer this one simply either, because the live business is in a number of different sorts of things right now. There is a huge live business of older acts catering to older people who have a lot of money.
Yep.
Let's say, the Rolling Stones, for instance, who are touring with incredibly high-priced tickets, who are appealing to a much
still
older,
playing massive venues.
a much older audience, and you have that world.
Right.
So the live business is that world. The live business is also all this electronic dance music, which has gotten huge over the last 3 years. Called EDM, electronic dance music, which is really not selling that much music, but is more part of being an experience. There's festivals in this world that have 50, 100,000 kids showing up, and there's a lot of business to be done at those festivals.
Let me interrupt that, because that's probably an area I suspect that most people seeing this don't know very much about. Who is EDM? Who are the companies? Are you involved in that business? Is it? Do you have to own a catalog to be in the business?
EDM.
Explain a little bit about
Well, EDM has become huge in the last few years. It is basically, dance music has always been amongst us,
Right.
but somehow over the last couple of years, dance music has sort of crossed from sort of being a more niche thing to, in many ways, being sort of the music of college students and the music of that generation. I mean, I don't want to go that far, because lots of that generation likes a lot of rock.
Yep.
And whatever it is, and hip hop. But this is huge. The difference between this movement and previous movements is it's not really reliant on buying music by an electronic dance music artist. It's much more about being at an event, being where a big DJ is going to be.
Not a hit-driven.
There's occasional things. There's a group called Swedish House Mafia, a few others that occasionally put songs out that cross over and become hits on pop radio. But most of it's not about that. It's mostly 75,000 kids going to Miami to go to the Ultra Festival for 3 days, and the business that comes out of that. The DJs who are in the scene make a significant amount of money. The people who publish those songs make a lot of money because their music is licensed in a lot of different places. And it's kind of fascinating, because there's also a lot of people who are looking at investing in this, from buying venues to buying festivals to getting involved with DJs. It's kind of fascinating. It's in many ways, because it can be done so easily digitally, and because it's not really reliant on necessarily hit songs or recorded catalog, it's a very sort of different music model.
And, we've talked about Razor and Tie being in so many different businesses than it was once in. And one of the ones, that you are now getting involved in more and more, I know, is the motion picture business. Talk a little bit about that. And, here, too, we're dealing with big studios, the classic, we just had the launch here of The Great Gatsby, and about as marketed a movie as has existed outside of a comic book franchise, probably. Talk about being an independent in that world.
Well, I would just say that I'm not totally in that world, but I've done some movie projects in the last couple of years. I would say that the most interesting movie project I've probably done last year is a movie called Concussion, which I was the executive producer on, and helped with the music and shot a little bit of it. I didn't shoot it, but we shot at my office some of it. And the movie business is sort of fascinating. It's the same way the music business is. You have the Great Gatsbys and the Iron Man 3s. I really have nothing to do with any of that, just like I have nothing to do with the new Rihanna album. I mean, it's just that there is, I think, kind of this, in the arts world, there are those kinds of franchise things that are coming out that cost tens of millions of dollars.
Will that always be true, do you think? That there'll always be the mega, people talk about the problems, but will there always be these big tent poles, as they're called in the music business?
Yes, I think well, forever, but I think that there are you still need these things that everyone likes to talk about, that everyone wants to see, that are marketed. And let's not kid ourselves that all of a sudden everything is just going to come from YouTube.
Right.
I mean, I could get into that with you at length, because it's amazing what's going on there. It's also amazing what's going on with YouTube in terms of sort of the kinds of things that become popular there, and whether they have any ability to translate into another venue, into another distribution. Some things do, some things don't.
Yeah.
I think society, I think we as people, as sort of consumers, still like to have these group experiences, and I think these kind of tentpole movie events, or everyone listening to the Adele record or whatever it is, are things that still, but they're going to be harder to come by.
Yeah.
On the movie side, I've been fascinated by the movie business because of the many different ways that one can distribute movies today, and the different ways that one can monetize a movie today. You can make a movie, a relatively inexpensive movie, and I mean really inexpensive, and find different ways of getting your investment back and possibly making a lot of money that has nothing to do with whether you open in 500 screens and whether or not you have a big box office success. I've been associated with movies that did almost no business at the box office whatsoever, but were very successful on a VOD, on foreign, pay-per-view, cable deals, Netflix, et cetera, et cetera. So in many ways, in what the music business is going through, where there's different ways of looking at projects now you monetize, and the movie business is doing the same thing.
And can you find your way through, being independent, can you find your way through that distribution matrix to get your product out there? You
can. Look, one thing that hasn't changed is if you make something that people don't want, it's not going to matter. I mean, I know that's obvious, but I mean,
if it's bad, people will definitely not watch it.
Well, actually, if it's bad today, people get it much quicker. In the old days, you'd put a record out and no one would get a chance to listen to one or two songs. They'd buy it, and they might only. Now, today, people really get a chance to experience everything before they commit to it, and there's so many ways that they can enjoy that without paying for it. So you really have the double whammy of people can hear it, and they don't necessarily have to make a commitment to pay for it. So if you have quality, I think that there's a way of getting through. This movie that we did called Concussion, which we opened it, which we premiered at Sundance and sold a couple days later, and will open nationally in the fall, is a relatively modest budget, a kind of a very indie, serious movie that does not have any household names, but people really liked the movie. They started getting behind it. When we were at Sundance with it, there were all these movie stars and all this, but people had kind of gotten the word that this was a good movie. A number of people wanted to buy it, and that is possible in a way today that maybe wasn't possible in 1974.
And is social media a big part of selling a movie like that? Are you creating, or do you have to create the buzz in that world, or is it have to flow in some sense more organically from what you have created?
Both. It's interesting. The social graph on Concussion was very small when we started getting some traction on that. In many ways, that was people sort of inside the movie business, really loving the movie and wanting to get behind it. I'm getting involved with another movie now that does not have a deal, that is made with unknown people, but because the people involved in the movie are really smart, it already has 160,000 Facebook likes. It's already got this huge social presence, and that is going to be a significant factor in terms of making a deal for this movie. Mm-hmm. But that's the great thing about today, Howard. It's like, yes, the social media can help. Doesn't necessarily have. You don't necessarily.
But the likes aren't going to make it a good movie.
The likes,
you got to make it a good movie.
Exactly.
Right?
But
So,
I think when you're looking at those
Yeah.
factors, and people go, maybe I'll buy this movie. It's coming with this built-in audience. Yeah. That's a good thing to have.
Yeah. Another business that I know is near and dear to your heart is the sports business, which is a huge part of the media world today. And I don't know how immersed you as Razor and Tie is necessarily immersed in sports. You obviously had your beginnings in the Knicks, etc. But talk about sports a bit. And a lot of people blame sports in terms of the high cost of cable networks and tickets, etc., as a problem in the marketplace. How and where do you see sports in the media world?
I'm amazed by the resiliency of sports and sports programming. I think that it's the one thing that sort of is surviving in this new media world that we're all living in. People still seem to need to sort of watch it in real time. All of the social around sports is people continue to talk about the TV ratings so much, about how the Super Bowl, 1/3 as many people watch the biggest sitcom today, but the Super Bowl ratings are as they were, when the Patriots won their first Super Bowl.
Thank you for raising such a warm memory.
Okay, but I think that what's not talked about enough about the sports thing is all the social around the sports. That's really the amazing thing. I mean, the ability for people to interact with their love of sports on so many different levels. We've really unleashed, this. I think it's just so over the top, but the ability to have every single app about every single statistic of every single thing that goes on with your team, and also it's fascinating to me how sports has been so smart in socializing. So the NFL I think the NFL's key is all of a sudden it's part of what you're it's how you're supposed to socialize with other people. You are supposed to be somewhere on Sunday watching with people. You're supposed to, they've done an amazing job on that. In terms of how it affects the broader, the broader world and how it impacts sort of people's relationship with their cable companies and all that stuff. I mean, look, if we're going to continue in the situation where people have to watch this in real time, they're going to continue to call the shots. Yeah. I mean, you're going to continue to have your Knicks tickets be 2 or 3 times as expensive as they used to be, and your Yankees tickets and all of those things. I mean, I just read an article in the Times this morning, or maybe it was the Journal, about how the renovations at the Garden, they've been renovating the Garden to the tune of like $1 billion, how that will never pay for itself under normal circumstances, except for the fact that all the media properties they have and all the social and everything they have will take care of it with no problem.
In terms of the media business overall, do you, and you're again this, as an independent participant but viewer, are the gatekeepers too powerful? Are the, in the public policy realm, people, it rises and falls, but in terms of the cable operators are too powerful, the studios, the networks, et cetera, are too powerful. Do you see that? Do you feel it in terms of your own business?
They're less powerful than they ever were. Listen, let's not kid ourselves. They're still powerful. But what's happened in recent times is they continue to be powerful, but there's just all these other alternative ways of getting your content to an audience. And it's not this utopian, everyone's just can do whatever they want to do and it'll all work out. Those gatekeepers exist, and that is an important route to get things out there. But you're in a situation now where, because of the digital revolution that we've gone through, you have the ability to connect directly with people, and you can connect directly with people, and you can go around gatekeepers, or you can create a market for something that you have that then, as I was saying before, like on that movie, then you can then go to those gatekeepers and say, I'm coming with some leverage, as opposed to, the difference is before you just have to pitch an idea. You'd have to pitch an idea, or you'd be an artist who just, was good. And you'd have somebody at a record company or a TV company or a film company going,
But they'd know what to do with your idea if it was a good one. I mean,
well, they would, but the point is that they had an enormous amount of power. Now, when you have that conversation, A, you may not need that conversation because you could have a potentially robust enough digital platform to launch something, or B, you come into that conversation with some leverage on your own. I've created a brand around myself. I'm not saying but one. I'm coming and having this meeting. Guess what? There's already 100,000 people who like me. I play 20 shows a week. I have this thing, and I want to now have a show on Comedy Central. Well, that's a different conversation than somebody 20 years ago. That guy seems funny. I'm not sure if he's funny enough for us. Yeah. But the gatekeepers are still important. We're not in this world where everybody who's popular on YouTube or has an incredible Instagram following now is a celebrity. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but I do want to say this is important, that we had a very interesting experience on YouTube where there was this woman who had an enormous amount of traction, and people were saying we have to sign her. And it was fast.
A recording
A
artist?
recording artist,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We have to sign her. So we went to see her, and we realized that she had created this amazing career for herself that was not possible before YouTube in terms of appealing to a very specific audience that loved what she does, kind of broken-hearted music right? But none of us, and nothing has happened since then, saw any ability to go beyond that. But she has a great career that she couldn't, if she, in a previous life, she never would have had that career.
As an artist, she is making her music and having a career, however you define the breadth of it.
She has a career that she never would have had, but the important thing, and what people like me and others need to do, is be able to have some sense of whether that is going to translate. The fact that she has this huge following, the numbers are insane, does that create something else? Does that create an opportunity beyond that? You have to, that's where you really have to, kind of not treat each situation, oh my God, 1 million followers, let's sign you to something.
This is occurring to me. Is geography important? You're a New York-based company, and people now virtually are kind of publishing and creating from everywhere and putting it, in a digital world. Does it still matter to be a New York company versus from, your basement in Columbus, Ohio?
I think it's huge. And I think that it's huge because no matter what happens digitally and virtually, I think that that the number of opportunities that one has, the being around creative people, people come to New York who are ambitious, who are creative. Not that there aren't ambitious, creative people other places, but there's a critical mass of those people. And how opportunities come up and how businesses grow and how franchises are created and all that is really, so much of it is interacting with people and collaborating with people and having meetings with people and going and seeing things. And I think just being in New York or Los Angeles, obviously there's many other places where things happen, but I think that you'll never be able to substitute for just what happens in being in a cosmopolitan urban environment with many motivated, smart, talented people all kind of mixing it up.
And it's probably a good lesson for we're at a law school here, and for law students and young professionals, watching, which is the importance of relationships and the importance at every stage of your career in building them and maintaining them and working at it.
It's huge. And as I will say as an entrepreneur, that Craig and I both make sure that we don't have too many days that go by where we just haven't had some interaction with someone who we didn't really know that well before, or is a potential opportunity. You kind of have to force yourself to do that. I can't tell you how many good things have happened from sort of serendipitous or inadvertent sort of things that just you didn't realize were going to happen, but you went and had that lunch with that person and the like, and all of a sudden you came up with an idea, and 2 years later it was great.
So we're winding down here.
Darn.
But I know. We could go on for hours, and and I'm sure we'd get a huge demo if we did. But one quick thing I wanted to touch on before we left is you are, for a businessman, immersed in the political world. I know, passionately, and you brought other friends kind of into your activities. Talk just a little bit about that. Quick, give me 30 seconds on why that's important. Is it an important part of your business, or is it just an important part of your person?
It has nothing to do with my business. I've just, we can maybe again go back to mom, but I'm a committed capitalist and an entrepreneur who believes very strongly in certain things about a society and having a more progressive society and more freedom for people, and feel that there's just an enormous amount of push coming from the right in terms of from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, and feel that people who sort of feel the same way that I do are not necessarily mobilized and pushing back as well as they should, despite the president getting elected twice. And so that's informed a lot of what I do on the side, but it really does not get involved in my business life.
Well, I don't know where the quote comes from, but the greatest title that you can have is citizen. So that's kind of, you're being a good citizen.
I'm trying to be. I'm sure there's people in many red states who would say I'm not being. But,
can't dunk anymore, but still a great citizen. So with that, I think we're a wrap. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Howard Homonoff, and this is Media Report. All right, so we're chatting away.
You're always saying something that's
Thank you very much.
I was just only disappointed. I wanted to close by saying that I'd been on the Today Show and Oprah and Joan Rivers, and this was maybe like one of the great experiences that I've ever had on television.